Okay. All right. So let's start with.
Take this off so your looks a little bit better. Got it on.
Let's start with right now with what's happening. So we've got an odd storm system, early storm, typical early kind of storm where it's just a bunch of thunderstorms in the Gulf. But it has the opportunity of growing into something, who knows what. It looks at the moment like it's going to be a rainfall event rather than a surge event. But how do you guys deal with these kinds of storms in terms of determining what their surge risk might be?
So it's really similar to how we do full-on hurricane surge. We still use a probabilistic approach, a probabilistic model, except we switch out the forcing. So in this case, and by forcing I mean the meteorology, the winds, what's driving the surge. So in this case, the wind field is very broad and sloppy and large and not symmetrical. So we use a type of model that would be used in, say, a winter storm surge event. This is obviously not a winter event, but the structure is closer to a winter storm than, say, a pure tropical storm. And so our systems allow us, we call it hot swappable, meaning we can easily switch. And it's fascinating. If the storm were to become or drift more towards tropical, we could immediately swap out and force it with the traditional hurricane surge based model, and the customer would see no difference. So it's a really slick system where we can, if you think of it like a car, right? The shape of the car, the color of the car, I can swap the engine out, keep the car running, and you'll never know that anything changed.
So this year, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority of Louisiana and the state's emergency preparedness officials in LSU have a new modeling process using both AdCert plus rainfall,
right,
to give a better idea of what happens in the Lake Pontchartrain area. Are you guys watching that? What's your involvement in that? Is there any involvement at all?
Only if they were to seek our advice. That system doesn't meet our operational requirements. It's what we call a deterministic model, which means it's run based off a single storm track in a single scenario. As residents of Louisiana know so well, the storm often doesn't go, it moves, it jumps around, the forecast evolves and shifts. So we don't rely on a single scenario, we rely on several hundred scenarios. So we sort of look at every possible outcome that can occur so that we can convey the risk. So when we talk to emergency managers, you can say, okay, this is the most likely outcome, but it could be as high as this. And so that enables them to plan and prepare for a range of outcomes and not be called sort of off guard, if you will, if the storm moves or jumps or intensifies. So that modeling system just doesn't meet our requirements.
Okay. Their reason for doing this is that they contend that the rainfall that occurs upriver, well, not upriver in the Mississippi River, but in the river systems around the lakes is not well captured by your models or any models for that matter at the moment. And they are using it in the context of emergency planning rather than actual decision making for the public.
Yeah. So the idea of fully coupling freshwater flooding, discharge, riverine, the traditional flow of fresh water after a heavy rain towards the ocean, and then the ocean kind of runs up and meets it, is we have an ongoing partnership with the National Water Center, which is a new NOAA facility in Tuscaloosa, and we anticipate having similar or better capabilities in the not too distant future. So NOAA is actively working on this. It's probably one of our biggest thrust areas within the whole agency. We think we'll have some enhanced capabilities soon.
Last year was a very active season, especially in the Lake Charles area. Can you talk about lessons learned from what you guys saw over there in terms of your ability of explaining to the public what was going on in advance and then afterwards?
Yeah, it's disasters remain a challenge to communicate. We live in a world where people want to know exactly what's going to happen 5 days before, and forecasting does not lend itself to saying it's going to be exactly this much. The wind's going to start blowing at exactly this hour at your house. But that is the expectation of society, is that forecasters can pinpoint with tremendous precision days in advance, and we simply can't. The limits of predictability, the limits of science don't enable us to get there. So that's something we just continuously have to work on, is we have to convey risk and uncertainty, which is very hard from a public perspective to understand. They're like, why can't you just tell me? Is it going to rain? Is it not going to rain? Why can't you just tell me? And any good meteorologist will always say chance, probability, express things as what could happen, what the uncertainty is. The public appetite for that is still quite low. There's still a desire for just tell me. Is the wind coming here? Is the hurricane coming here? Just tell me. Just tell me. That's what I want to know. So there's that component of it. The other thing is, we've always talked about how sensitive storm surge is to slightest changes, but the lower example takes the cake. We actually went back and with our storm surge modeling, lifted the storm and shifted it west, 20 miles. 20 miles. You can bike 20 miles, you can walk 20 miles, albeit long, but 20 miles is not a big shift. And it changed the outcome in Holly Beach by 15 feet and in Lake Charles by 10 feet. More surge. So for the residents of those areas, while they got dealt a pretty abrupt hit, if the center would have wobbled just a little bit to the west, they would have gotten wind and surge instead of primarily wind.
I think that would do it.